When I first heard there was a musical based on the anime Death Note, I thought it would be a cringe fest. But this musical has no business being as good as it is. I would go as far as to say it's one of my favourite musical albums out there. So today, if you could indulge me, I'm going to take my music degree out of the garbage for about an hour and talk about this musical. Death Note. Whether you've watched it before or not, you probably know the basic premise. Overachiever with a god complex and an idealised sense of justice finds a book where if he writes somebody's name in it, they die. Chaos ensues. The 2003 manga has been adapted countless times. An anime, video games, live-action movies, and the questionable Netflix adaptation.
Relax, Light. You're asleep. You're asleep and you're dreaming of some 8-foot-tall demon.
Oof. But today's video is about the musical. Let's begin with a bit of background. The musical received a New York workshop in 2014, but sadly an English language production never happened. A Japanese production premiered in 2015, and later a Korean production. I always assumed that the Japanese version was the original and then it was rewritten for English, but I was surprised to find out that it was actually the other way around. But on reflection that makes sense, because the English lyrics fit the music way too well to be rewrites. The music and lyrics were by Frank Wildhorn and Jack Murphy respectively, and they both went so hard. You might recognise Wildhorn's name as the score writer for the Jekyll and Hyde musical. He also wrote Where Do Broken Hearts Go for Whitney Houston, which is random but cool. We love a versatile king. When Wildhorn was first approached about doing the musical, he was hesitant at first, but it was his son who convinced him to take on the project. So, obligatory moment of gratitude for Wildhorn Jr. there. We owe you so much. So in this video, I'm going to go through each song in the musical and provide a bit of a lyric analysis and also a bit of a score analysis. I'm not going to talk about the plot, the staging, or anything like that. This is solely based on the music. Before we get stuck into the first song, I did just want to mention the soundtrack from the anime, because the musical regularly references ideas that we hear in the soundtrack music. We can't start analysing the musical without first acknowledging the original anime soundtrack by Yoshihisa Hirano and Hideki Taniguchi. These 28 tracks played in the background of scenes throughout the anime, and there are many references to them in the musical, which is smart because the anime soundtrack has some awesome songwriting on it. Let's start with instrumentation. Most of the songs on the soundtrack use rock instrumentation: guitars, basses, pianos, drum kits. This instrumentation is pretty identical to the musical. The only times new instruments are added in the musical, there's a very clear narrative purpose behind it. In the anime, there's a piece of music entitled Light's Theme and a piece entitled L's Theme. What's interesting is they both start similarly: a solo instrument playing broken chords, with Light's instrument being a guitar and L's being a piano. This idea is extended into the musical, and these two characters are regularly identified with these respective instruments. Next, melodic and harmonic motifs. A motif is similar to a riff or a lick. It's a memorable returning passage in a piece of music. The anime soundtrack is full of motifs, some of which transfer over to the musical. The first one I'll mention we'll call the Kyrie motif. Here's where it's taken from. Death Note has a lot of religious imagery in it, and the Kyrie music plays into this as it's heavily inspired by Gregorian chants, and even uses the Latin Kyrie lyrics. Many people describe the melody as quite uneasy. A reason for this is because it uses a scale we're less familiar with hearing in modern Western music. The Kyrie uses a mode, the Dorian mode to be exact. I won't spend ages here going into detail about the differences, but speaking generally, modes preceded scales as a way of dividing up octaves into 12 tones. Lots of early music used modes, and that's why you might get a medieval sense when you hear the Kyrie. Back to the musical. Modal melody writing features a number of times throughout, and it's a clever way Wildhorn represents his immortal characters, the Shinigamis, as well as characters who have a strong sense of tradition, like Soichiro Yagami. The second motif I'll mention is a lot simpler. I'll call it the two-tone motif. Quite simply, it's when we hear a melody or harmony interchange between one note and the note a tone above it. Here's an example in the soundtrack. Now all that context is out the way, let's talk about the first song in this musical. The overture is less than a minute long, but it sets the scene for the musical perfectly. It begins simply with the sound of a clock ticking. This is a sound we hear a lot in the source material, while Kira counts down 40 seconds between his writing somebody's name in the death note and seeing the victim die. For somebody unfamiliar with the source material, the sound of a clock ticking doesn't incite strong emotion one way or the other, but Wildhorn delivers a foreboding sense with diminished seventh chords from brass and strings. Remember that two-tone motif from the anime soundtrack I mentioned earlier? The very first words sung in this musical use that motif. The chorus chant the word Kira. At the climax, the strings begin playing a descending chromatic pattern, which is reminiscent of the anime soundtrack too. I think particularly for somebody unfamiliar with the source material, the overture works brilliantly. From the get-go, there's a feeling of unease and tension, and you find yourself asking questions immediately.
Where is the justice when the guilty all go free?
Where is the Justice introduces us to Light Yagami. It's his I am/I want song. This is a convention in musical theatre where early on in the show, our protagonist tells the audience who they are/what they want. The song takes place in class where Light begins debating his teacher about the criminal justice system. As the song progresses, Light rallies his classmates up and they join his declaration. What's interesting with this song is that it really makes us empathise with Light and see him as this moral figure almost. Bro is spitting straight facts in this song, and it's aged like fine wine since 2014. Let's just have a listen to a few of the lyrics.
Let the corporations make the regulations and hold no one accountable when everything goes wrong. Let the rich and famous get away with murder. Every time a high-priced mouthpiece starts to talk, his client gets to walk. Tell me, where is the justice?
In the manga and anime, Light was kind of a bad guy from the start. He wasn't particularly likeable even before he found the Death Note. But I think this approach the musical uses works better. Arguably, when you have the audience on the side of this character at the start, they'll spend the rest of the show questioning their feelings, their own ideals around justice, their morals, making it that more interesting of a psychological experience. The song effectively identifies Light's beliefs surrounding justice. Throughout the anime and manga, we see that Light has a naive belief that everything is either good or bad, and this is summarised in many lyrics in the song.
Perhaps it's time we drain the color from it then, till we're back to seeing black and white and wrong and right again.
Also, I love that internal rhyme. Gorgeous. There's so many Easter eggs in these lyrics and nods to what's about to come. Light criticises judges pushing pencils mostly get it wrong, which is an interesting nod to the fact that shortly, Light himself will be a judge, literally pushing a pencil into a Death Note. There's a line about victims of crime, all of them afraid to walk the streets at night, which is funny because the same line is actually said in the anime, but in that context, Light is talking about criminals who are scared to walk the streets because of Kira. That's such a tiny reference, but so clever. There's so many of these in the show. And overall, the lyrics really show how much Jack Murphy got to know these characters. The attention to detail is fantastic, and you can tell Murphy researched the source material really well. The song also helps characterise Light as this charismatic guy who can convince people easily. One of the reasons Light got as far as he did as Kira was because he had this charisma about him. And he proves those charisma skills by, in the course of this one song, radicalising a whole classroom of teenagers. The lyrics express this, but the score itself uses clever techniques to amplify it too. Early in the song, Light's classmates are contributing only vocables to the song, singing oohs and ahs underneath the debate between Light and his teacher. But as Light starts to convince them, they begin echoing his lyrics, and towards the end even start chanting the word justice over and over. The song starts with a thin texture of just Light accompanied by a piano, but by the end he has a whole chorus singing with him, guitars, drums, basses, strings. It's a good metaphor. What's also quite interesting is this is one of the few times unnamed chorus parts have meaningful lines. Towards the end, the students start adding their own contributions about law and justice.
Politicians make their speeches all day long, while judges pushing pencils mostly get it wrong.
I like this little tidbit because it shows that many people share Light's values and that those views can be valid, but it's how you action those views that make you good or bad. There's a cool key change at the end of the song. Up until this point we've been in E-flat minor, but we end up modulating to F-sharp minor. This could have been quite a seamless modulation. E-flat minor and F-sharp minor have a few tones in common. But Wildhorn interestingly chooses phrase modulation, a technique without any transitional material linking the two keys. There's this random E major chord which sounds out of place and obviously is a diatonic to E flat minor. You could say it's actually an A flat minor chord with a raised fifth and the fifth is the root, but what's more likely is that we're not in E flat minor anymore. It's an immediate transition to F sharp minor, and this chord is actually the 7th degree in that key. The next few chords go 7, 5, 1, with that 1 clearly showing we're now in F sharp. I think Wildhorn purposefully chose to do a phrase modulation rather than a more subtle choice like a common chord or an enharmonic modulation, because it's symbolic for a lot of the show's themes. Light is a black and white thinker. He's either in E flat minor or F sharp minor. There's no grey area where he's transitioning from one to the other. This song achieves a lot. It's great characterization for Light, it sets up the narrative, and it begins dropping themes and motifs we're going to see throughout the rest of the show. And we're on to song 2. This is sung by Ryuk and Rem as they're in the Shinigami realm watching down on the human world. The instrumentation continues to give us clever metaphors. The introduction to this song is played on a music box. If you've ever had a music box, you'll know it's as simple as twisting the key, then sitting back and watching the mechanism work. And that's pretty much what Ryuk does in Death Note. He drops the Death Note into the human world, then sits back and lets everyone else entertain him. So another cool metaphor from Frank Wildhorn there. The lyrics perfectly characterise Ryuk and Rem. Ryuk sings of humans in a demeaning way, and without much purpose beyond being entertainment to ease his boredom. He sings the lyric, "While we stay eternally bored."
Going through the motions as if there will be a reward. While we stay eternally bored there.
And that made me laugh, because usually when someone says they're eternally bored, it's hyperbole. But for Ryuk, an immortal, he is literally eternally bored. As for Rem, she's more thoughtful. She's intrigued by humans, especially by love that they can have for one another, foreshadowing her falling in love with Misa later on in the show. I also really like this line.
Yes, but how they fascinate, confusing fate with what is merely chance.
Light is convinced that he found the Death Note because of fate, because he is justice and he is the god of the new world. Whereas Ryuk regularly reminds us it was just chance. He just dropped it and it just happened to be found by Light. Nothing more. The score is in 6/8 and the instrumentation is grandiose. It almost feels like we're waltzing at a high-end ball. It gives Rem and Ryuk a sense of power and dominance, which is particularly relevant as ultimately they are responsible for everything that's about to happen in the human world. The song is in A harmonic minor, with a few passages in A melodic minor too. In Western music theory, there are 3 scale patterns for the minor scale. The 2 we hear most often are the melodic minor and the harmonic minor. An issue many songwriters face when writing melody with the harmonic minor scale is that the 7th degree is raised by 1 semitone, creating an augmented second between the 6th and 7th degrees. This larger than usual gap between the 2 tones is often undesirable, so when melody writing, many composers instead choose the melodic minor scale. As you can see, in addition to the raised 7th, the 6th degree of the scale is also raised in the melodic minor scale. Despite this, interestingly, much of the melody in this song does actually use the harmonic minor scale, and that's purposefully. Most of our ears are more accustomed to hearing the melodic minor in melodies, so hearing this less familiar melody emphasises that Ryuk and Rem are not of our world. Additionally, augmentation in music gives melodies a mysterious sound that evokes a feeling of unease in the listener. A good choice for this song. Something else I love about the songwriting here is the appoggiaturas that start each chorus. An appoggiatura is an ornamental note that temporarily displaces and subsequently resolves into a main note.
They're only human, they don't see who they are is who they'll always be.
The first bar of the chorus is accompanied by the tonic chord, an A minor chord. However, the first pitch sung by Ryuk and Rem is a G sharp, which is not part of an A minor chord. However, the melody quickly resolves up to an A satisfyingly. These appoggiaturas make all the difference in setting the mood for both this song and these characters. Let me show you what the chorus would sound like without the appoggiaturas. Overall, this is a really fun song and a great introduction to the Shinigamis.
The hardest rains, the coldest winds are waiting for the hurricane.
Hurricane takes place right after Light has written his first name in the Death Note and has seen his victim die. The beginning of the song sounds melancholy, as to symbolise Light's initial hesitance towards the Death Note.
Did I hear correctly? Did it really happen? Was it simply done by writing down his name? Killing indirectly, pen and ink and paper. Writing is the gun, I only have to aim.
But as the song goes on, Light sees the Death Note as an opportunity to achieve his goals, and the texture becomes more triumphant with him. The second verse begins with
Finally a chance to find a little justice.
Which calls back to the opening song of the musical, where Light questions, where is the justice, and is there any justice? And now he's found the answer. He is the justice. What's very cool with the lyrics here is, the first time the chorus plays, Light sings,
The hardest rains, the coldest winds are waiting for the hurricane.
and then the second time it comes around, he sings,
I'll bring the rain, I'll bring the wind. I am the mighty hurricane.
In the first chorus, he's removing himself from what he has done with the Death Note. But then, after some self-reflection, he takes ownership of his actions. I am the hurricane. The hurricane itself is great imagery for Kira. Like a hurricane, Kira is an unpredictable and powerful force, capable of taking countless lives effortlessly. In the bridge of the song, we hear Light sing those infamous words for the first time.
I am the god of a brave new world.
Differently to the manga and anime, Light says he's the god of a brave new world, which is likely a reference to Huxley's famous dystopian novel Brave New World, which centres around a supposed perfect world where all pain and sadness has been eradicated by social engineering. A parallel could be drawn between Light's Brave New World and Huxley's, where the world is made perfect by questionable means. Up until now, we haven't seen Light's narcissism. We know he has a strong sense of right and wrong, but we haven't seen that arrogance and that complex that he is the answer to fixing justice. Up until now, many of Light's lyrics are asking questions. Why is this allowed to happen? What causes this? And even at the start of this song, Light is asking, did this really happen? But this song is where he stops asking questions, because he is now God, and would a god even have questions? Looking at the score for a moment, there's some cool subtleties. At the start of the song, we hear this little piano riff played monophonically. When it comes back for the second verse, after Light has accepted the power of the Death Note, it is played in 2 octaves, symbolising it's not just Light anymore, but it's Light and Kira. The riff is also quite similar to L's piano motif we hear regularly in the musical, so I wonder if that's a little bit of foreshadowing. I also like the word painting in the chorus. The word hurricane alone spreads across nearly an octave, symbolising the great reach a hurricane can have.
I will bring the power of the hurricane.
I don't think I've mentioned yet the singers themselves on this demo. Light is played brilliantly by Jeremy Jordan, whose voice you might recognise from various Broadway shows, as Varian in the Tangled series, or that viral video of him singing Celine Dion's It's All Coming Back to Me Now. His vocals, especially at the climax of this song, are so spectacular. The tessitura in this song is huge too, it's nearly 2 octaves. Some really impressive singing from Jeremy Jordan here.
Except for Kira.
Moving forward, at this stage in the show, Ryuk has presented himself to Light, and Light has shared his plans. Some people think this song sounds like Poor Unfortunate Souls from The Little Mermaid, and it definitely does have Disney villain vibes. But if we're going to relate it to Disney, to me it's kind of a same but different version of Friend Like Me from Aladdin. Both are about a supernatural power introducing themselves to and sharing their power with the protagonist. Throughout the song, Ryuk is almost teasing Light, singing of Kira sarcastically and suggesting it isn't a big deal and that it's amusing to him that people are taking such an interest. He even says that his dropping the notebook is, quote, of no consequence, and that Light's self-aggrandizing assumption that he was chosen to use the Death Note is comical. I think part of this is also Ryuk provoking Light. Ryuk is bored, he wants entertainment, he wants Light to keep using the Death Note and keep providing him with fun. In the chorus, Ryuk refers to Light as playing a game. This is a phrase that regularly returns throughout the show.
The masses cheering, Kira. Don't know he's like Yagami, playing his dangerous game.
From Ryuk's perspective, this is a game to him. He doesn't see any value in human life. He treats humans like toys to play a game with. I love this line.
You think you're making changes, but the only thing you can change is your name.
Ryuk is immortal. He has seen all the tragedies of humankind across thousands of years. He knows history repeats itself, and in the end, nothing truly changes. He knows in the long run, the only thing Light will have changed is his name. At the end of the song, Ryuk gets distracted by an apple and starts singing about that instead.
Kira, who makes a list of people whose names he'll write down and, oh look now, there's an apple. Mind if I just take a bite?
Which is funny on its own, but it also really hammers in how trivial Ryuk finds all of Kira's antics. Unfortunately, there isn't a score available for this song, so I can't go into detail about the content, but there's a few things I can take away just from hearing the audio. The instrumentation is very orchestral. We can hear strings, woodwind, percussion, and brass. This contrasts with the songs sung by human characters, which tend to be guitars, pianos, and drums. I think this is purposeful and relates to the idea of high art versus low art music. Classical orchestral music, like that accompanies the Shinigamis, is considered high art, whereas pop and rock music, like that accompanies the humans, is considered low art. This parallels the fact that the Shinigamis are more powerful than the humans. The piece sounds grandiose. If there were no vocals attached, I would assume the instrumental was for a piece of opera. Earlier I mentioned the comparison many people have drawn between this song and Poor Unfortunate Souls. Whilst the chord progressions aren't identical, there's a lot of similarities. Both songs regularly use 7 chords and sus4 chords, for example. What's interesting is dissonant notes are treated differently to how we've heard them previously in the musical. Previously, dissonance has been unprepared, but in the case of this song, those sus4 chords are suspensions, so there's preparation in the tones prior. The sus chords still have tension, but they feel slightly more purposeful and placed than previous examples. Many of Ryuk's songs have this almost circus music feel, potentially a suggestion that Ryuk behaves like a ringmaster, as he ultimately does lead this circus of a story. And enter Misa Amane. I love that, differently to the source material, in the musical they make Misa this pop idol who sends messages to Kira through her songs. So for this song, Misa has not yet received her death note, but Kira has brought to justice the man who killed her parents. And this song is basically a love song to Kira, thanking him for that. After the slow introduction, the song is this 80s-inspired pop track. It feels out of place with the rest of the songs, but I think that was intentional. In musicals, generally the idea is that we're in this alternative universe where singing to the characters is as natural as thinking or speaking. But for this song, the character is a singer literally performing a song, so to emphasise that separation, I think Wildhorn purposefully made the score disjunct from all the other songs. Again, sadly a score isn't available for this song, but I can pick out a few things. Harmony-wise, I'm pretty sure the accompaniment uses the questionably titled sensitive female chord progression. The progression was titled this after it was used regularly by, quote, sensitive female singers of the early 2000s who wrote emotionally driven songs. Because it's a chord progression so identifiable with female pop stars, it makes sense that it was chosen for our character, who herself is a female pop star.
Well, they say I'm too young, and they call me a fool who can't possibly know my own art.
The song has a bit of a gospel feel about it too, especially with the background singers. Death Note is known for its religious imagery, so it makes sense to see a bit of that in the musical too, and because Misa worships Kira, it was a good choice to add it to this song.
We all need a healer, somebody to help.
Ugh, this song is so friggin' sad. And not because it's a sad song, but because of the context. So just before this song, Sayu Yagami is speaking with her brother Light about Kira. Light asks her what she would say to Kira if she met him, and Sayu says she would tell him to stop and that he should follow in her brother's example. Obviously not knowing her brother is, in fact, Kira. The song is all about Light being Sayu's hero, which is so bittersweet. In the Japanese production, Misa actually joins in at the end of this song, and her hero is also Light, but in the opposite way to Sayu, which is quite poetic actually. I don't have too much to say about this song, it's your typical musical theatre ballad. I will mention it's the first of many light puns in this musical.
A dream chasing dreams, a light that's always burning bright.
Don't worry though, the best light pun is yet to come.
The game begins the same way. I look for patterns on the screen.
Here is where we finally meet Elle. I mentioned in the introduction to this video that the anime soundtrack utilises character motifs and themes in the music, and this extends to the musical. Elle has a little piano motif we hear regularly, and it's not too different to the one in the anime. And that's how the song begins. I mentioned during Hurricane that Elle's piano riff is quite similar to Light's. In fact, it's actually close to being a copy of Light's riff, just backwards, which is a great way to symbolise that these characters are so similar, but also so different. And potentially, it's also a nod to Elle's idea of working backwards, although that might be a bit of a reach. I like that in the musical there's kind of a parallel between Elle and Ryuk. Ryuk approaches this whole Kira situation as a game, and Elle kind of does as well. I mean, it's in the title of the song. And I like that the musical doesn't present Elle as 100% a good guy, because whilst he's certainly a better human than Light, he still has questionable moments. He treats the investigation like an exciting puzzle to finish. His investigative career is more so because he enjoys solving things rather than enjoys bringing bad people to justice, although that does play a smaller part in it. And I love that the musical doesn't portray Elle or Light as 100% hero or 100% villain. That's hard to achieve in a 2-hour musical, but they manage it. Anyway, back to the song itself. Like quite a few songs in the musical, it gives us something we didn't see in the source material. So the song is an internal monologue from Elle. He's just witnessed Kira's first mistake, killing Elle stand-in on TV, and he's reflecting how he's got to this stage. Throughout the first 2 verses, there's a sense of calm almost. A gentle piano playing broken chords accompanies Elle whilst he outlines his investigative methods.
Empty your mind of any theories till all the facts are in. Start at the end of all your queries to learn where things begin.
And the texture begins to build when Elle announces that he's ready to begin the game. As usual, there's some brilliant creative writing in here. I particularly like the line,
You analyze by working backwards. Effects reveal their cause.
Elle states that he works backwards, followed up by saying effects reveal their cause, i.e. the psychological phenomena cause and effect. Not only is this great lyric writing, it also is true to what Elle does in the story. He can't determine the cause of these criminals' deaths, but he can investigate the effect, to hopefully deduce the cause. There's a lot of lyrics referring to data and maths, and that's another reoccurring theme in the musical.
The calculus of a solution.
Elle is symbolised by numbers and data, whereas Light is symbolised by nature, such as the hurricane. Looking at the score itself, the chorus actually has the same chord progression as Light's opening song, Where is the Justice? Let me show you.
The game begins the same way. I look for patterns on the screen, connecting bits of data until I find out what they mean.
I wonder if the use of this progression is a subtle answer to that original question, where is the justice? Indicating Elle is the justice.
There are lines that can't be crossed. There are things you shouldn't do.
This song is an insight into the morals of Soichiro Yagami, especially how they contrast with his son Light's. Lyrically, Soichiro uses a number of sayings and proverbs about justice. For example,
You You don't justify the means in the service of an end.
This song makes it clear that for Soichiro, the end doesn't justify the means, yet we know for Light, it's the opposite. This is another way the musical questions if L is entirely heroic. In addition to schooling his son about right and wrong, Soichiro is also criticising L's methods in the song. L has just indirectly killed Lindell Taylor in the interest of catching Kira, which Soichiro vehemently disagrees with.
You don't kill someone as a substitute. You don't load a gun, close your eyes and shoot.
In the next verse, Light agrees with his father in an attempt to manipulate him into bringing Light into the task force. As the final chorus comes in, Light echoes Soichiro's lines a few beats behind, in an attempt to show his father he agrees with him.
You don't kill someone as a substitute. You don't load a gun, close your eyes and shoot.
I think it's poetic how Wildhorn chooses to have Light echo his father's lines rather than sing them in unison with him. The whole song is about not crossing these lines. Well, Light just crossed his father's vocal line. Is that a reach? Looking at the score, many of the previous songs have a syncopated beat in the accompanying instruments, but the instruments in this song are playing straight with little decoration in between the 4 beats of each bar. I think this is really representative of Soichiro. He's straight to the point, and if we really want to push the point, he's so strict about lines that even the instruments can't go outside of the lines of each beat of the song. Yeah, that is definitely reaching. When Light sings his verse, there's a clear contrast. The piano accompanying him plays syncopated chords, and the bass drum has unstructured hits. Another interesting point is that Soichiro's verses are in D major, whereas Light's are in the parallel minor, which is clever because the lyrics themselves are quite positive about valuing lessons Light's father has given him. But because it's in a minor key, there's that unease and confirmation that Light's being dishonest in this verse.
The truth is hard to sort out among the secrets and the lies.
And here is our first Light and L duet. You might recognise the melody from The Game Begins, L's earlier solo, but there's some subtle and some not so subtle changes. At the beginning we hear that same piano motif, but the difference this time is it's joined by a guitar playing an inverted version of that motif. As we mentioned earlier, throughout the show L is represented by a piano and Light by a guitar, so as they move in on one another, it's cool to see their motifs intermingle. The chorus hits with L and Soichiro singing in unison, contrasting with the previous song where Soichiro did not sing in unison with Light. I think this emphasises that whilst L and Soichiro don't see eye to eye on everything, they have enough shared values and goals to be able to share a melody. The next chorus is shared between L and Light.
The line is quickly blurring between what's right and what is not.
This is a great reference back to There Are Lines. Elle is reflecting on having Lindell Taylor killed, and Light is reflecting on killing not just criminals, but also people who get in the way. Both of them are questioning their own ideals of justice. I think it's smart how in Elle's chorus with Soichiro they sing in unison, but with Light they sing in harmony, because they have a lot in common, but also a lot not. So their rhythm is the same, but their pitch isn't. When Light and Elle sing in harmony in their duets, Elle always has the upper harmony. The characters have a similar vocal range in the musical, so theoretically either could take the high harmony, but I think Elle always having it is a subtle nod to the fact that he has the moral high ground. After this, Light and Elle sing in counterpoint, taking lyrics from their earlier verses. This is a musical theatre convention. Probably the most familiar example would be the confrontation in Les Mis.
I rid the world of any criminal who wants to play, and also rid the world of anybody who gets in my way.
Counterpoint is such a good technique for confrontation narratives, and it works beautifully here. That is Act 1 finished. If you've been enjoying the video so far, please give it a like and subscribe. Now, before we move on to Act 2, I do need to tell you that unfortunately a few songs in this act don't have a recording, or at least it hasn't been put online. So the first song I'm going to talk about is actually the second song in this act. There is a reprise of Where is the Justice just before this, but I can't find it anywhere. With that out the way, let's discuss.
Love is for mortals and fools.
This song takes place after Rem has explained to Misa the sacrifice Jealous made to save her life. As an immortal, Rem has seen love result in disaster time and time again, most recently with Jealous's love for Misa. And this song is both a warning to Misa about her pursuing Kira romantically, as well as Rem's own conflicted feelings about her growing love for Misa. Whilst the script was made for English language, Wildhorn and Murphy regularly make reference to its Japanese origins. In this song, Murphy's lyrics reference a Japanese proverb, the frog in a well.
Like a frog in a well, who is sure he's in the ocean.
The proverb basically refers to somebody who is intellectually complacent and thinks they know everything there is to know. In the manga and anime, Rem's feelings towards Misa are more ambiguous. You could view them as romantic or simply platonic. But I love that the musical abandons all subtleties and Rem is just gay as hell for Misa. Mortals and Fools cleverly contrasts with the song that was in the same space in Act 1, They're Only Human. A few subtle nods to the song include the semitonal melody at the start of the verses in both songs. It might be a bit of a reach, but I interpret this melody where the pitches are really close together, almost like the character is uncertain, but once they start spreading the pitches out higher and lower, they're becoming more confident of their statement. Instrumentally, this song introduces a new instrument. I believe it's either a shakuhachi or at least a western flute intended to sound like one. The shakuhachi is a bamboo flute and is a traditional instrument dating back as early as 7th century Japan. When I first heard that introduction, it sounded pentatonic or modal to me, and I quickly worked out it uses the notes of the Aeolian mode. But then I had to thinking, there are Japanese scales out there. I wonder if this was actually inspired by one of those. So after a bit of digging, I found the Hirajoshi scale, and lo and behold, it consists of the tones used in this flute music. Sadly, I never studied non-Western scales, so I'm not going to pretend I know everything, or anything for that matter, about them. But why did Wildhorn choose to introduce these callbacks to Japan? I think part of it is reminding us that Rem is an immortal who has been around for forever. Time is experienced so differently to her that these scales and instruments she heard centuries ago for the first time probably feel like last week to her.
This time stalemate, but just you wait.
Okay, a bit of context for this song. This is when Elle and Light first meet and Elle reveals his identity to Light. So this song is Light trying to deduce if this guy really is Elle, and if so, why is he telling him this? And for Elle, he's trying to deduce if this guy is Kira, obviously. The whole song is a stalemate. Light has just solved the problem of hidden surveillance, only to be met with an even bigger problem, which is Elle. He thought he was winning, but now he's been completely thrown off his game. Anyway, the instrumentation is really cool. Elle's verse is accompanied by piano, and Light's verse is accompanied by guitar, true to that ongoing theme.
Each time I challenge, he responds. He takes the bait as if he's taunting me.
I wonder, is this guy for real? I wonder, is he who he claims to be?
There's some interesting modulations in this song. It starts in E minor, then halfway through the verse, the melody leads us chromatically into this tertiary modulation up to G minor. It's a nice choice because it's more noticeable than the likes of a circle of fifths modulation, and it's a good way to indicate the character's instability.
He waves 100 magic wands, and soon 100 men just cease to be. I haven't figured out just how. He doesn't kill them with a knife or gun.
The end of the verse modulates back down to E minor, helped out by this secondary dominant. And then there's this cadence, which at first sounds like a deceptive cadence because it begins with a dominant chord and then moves to the submediant. But then unexpectedly, another dominant chord is added, which in context is brilliant because Elle has just said, I haven't figured it out just yet. Oh, but I'm pretty sure it's your son. He is being deceptive, and he's showing that by deceiving the deceptive cadence.
But if you ask me here and now, I'm pretty sure that Kira is your son.
Leading into the choruses, there's more clever storytelling using modulation. The end of the verse modulates back down to E minor, and the first chord of the chorus hits and it's an E minor chord, i.e. the tonic. But wait, this chorus is in G major. That E minor chord was not actually the tonic, but another little bit of deception.
Like it or not, I am his alibi.
All or nothing, so let's get to it.
And I love that B7 at the end because it's a great example of chord borrowing with a narrative purpose. So B7 is not diatonic, meaning it's not part of the scale in the prevailing key, which is G major. It has this D sharp, which does not feature in the scale. If the progression was diatonic, it would instead be a B minor chord. Let me show you the difference. Doesn't hit the same, does it? But how did that B7 come to be here, and why was it used? The B7 is borrowed from our relative minor, E minor. It also results in this awesome chromatic bass line where the root notes go D, D sharp, E. I love this push and pull it creates between G major and E minor. The deceptiveness of tonality is narratively perfect for this song. Towards the climax of this song, there's a clever reference back to L's first solo, The Game Begins, where he talks about working backwards, effect and cause. Light sings the line, win or lose, and L follows up by saying the phrase backwards, lose or win.
Win or lose, I win, this is it.
I'd say this is probably my favourite song in the musical. Musically, it's awesome to listen to, and it's just the epitome of what this story is about.
I'll only love you more.
This is a beautiful love song sung by Misa. It's a song she writes and releases in her capacity as a pop idol. It's both a love letter to Kira, but it also has hidden messages in it. The lyric writing is so great because if you just listen to the song not knowing it's from Death Note, it reads as your typical love ballad, but practically every lyric is a note to Kira.
You rescue me from all my tears. I gladly give you half my years.
Out of context, it sounds like the singer's lover has saved her from sorrow and she wants to devote the rest of her life to him. But we know it means, Kira, you rescued me from the grief of my parents' deaths, and I'm willing to give up half of my years to make the Shinigami ideal and help you. This is another cool line.
I'll read your name and see your face.
This is a hint to Kira that she has a death note, knows the method of killing, and has the Shinigami eyes. A line in the chorus that, on reflection, is really quite sad is,
If I find you, maybe love me too.
it's different from a usual character pining for another. Usually they desperately want their love to reciprocate their feelings. But for Misa, she'd love for Kira to love her back, but it's not the be-all or end-all. The most important thing for her is that she can help Kira and repay him. There's a lovely key change at the climax of this piece, from G major to A flat major. It's a chromatic modulation, yet it feels like a greater lift than that. It's very well written. In the original key of G major, Misa sings the pickup that she's sung before every other chorus.
I'll pay any price for finding you.
But instead of falling to a B for the rest of the phrase, like all other choruses, Misa stays on the C as a pivot note into the new key.
I'll pay any price for finding you.
This song is such a lovely musical theatre ballad, and would also be a great audition song for any mezzos out there.
Honor bound and bound by honesty.
This song is Soichiro questioning his faith in his son and his own values. Honour is a great theme for Soichiro Yagami. At the heart of his character is a man who struggles between his duty to his family and his duty to justice as a police officer. In this song, he questions if his honour towards his family or towards justice is more important. Traditional Japanese instruments really match his character in that he sticks to the traditions of justice and honour. I wish there was sheet music available for this song because there's so many things I want to check out. I'm wondering if the melody is based around one of those Japanese scales, but my ear is just not good enough to be 100% certain. The song has some of the best lyric writing in the whole show, so many gorgeous metaphors and double meanings. The singer, Michael Lanning, brings out these lines so well. I love the way his timbre changes when he's singing of Kira, then when he's singing of light. I love this line in particular, the way he swaps so seamlessly from harsh to soft.
Listen to me, am I crazy, thinking he could be some insane, unfeeling monster, somehow raised by me?
The guilt and anguish Soichiro feels is expressed so well in the musical. Murphy has this ability to make us empathise so hard in a short space of time.
Timelines and coincidences can't replace hard facts. But if what I'm seeing bends as light refracts.
Ugh, I need a moment. That is my single favourite line in the musical. And I can't believe it's a light pun. The double meaning is beautiful. We're familiar with the process of light bending during refraction, but the line also means, if what I'm seeing, i.e. these Kira murders, correlate with light, i.e. the person, damn. Murphy deserves a Tony just for this line. Soichiro is honour bound to bring Kira to justice, but also bound by the honesty that means admitting his son could be Kira.
Honor bound and bound by honesty. Honor bound to serve his family.
At the end of the song, he changes the refrain from honour bound and bound by honesty to honour bound to serve his family, because he decides to put his family above his morals and choose to believe that light isn't Kira because he can't accept any other reality.
One and the same as the me who is playing his game.
This is just so rock and roll. It could be a great hit for a rock band. During this song, whilst playing a game of tennis, Elle and Light are trying to get inside each other's minds and work out each other's game plan. With that tennis match, making that metaphor very literal. In previous Elle and Light duets, the instrumentation changes based on who is singing, but for this duet, it's the same for both of them throughout, which makes sense because the whole song is them trying to think and act like one another. This song is a lesson in building anticipation musically. Every musical element plays a part in building tension, and it is so good. From the very start of this song up until the first chorus, the guitar plays this repeated D quaver over and over. The repetition builds anticipation throughout the verse, and we get such a satisfying resolution when the chorus hits and we get these chunky chords. Can you describe a chord as chunky? Screw it, they're chunky.
I look through his eyes and see what he sees, and then improvise until I can learn what puts him at ease.
There's barely any chords in this chorus that aren't decorated. There's this lovely D minor add 2, F major 7s, G minor 6s, and they all work together so seamlessly. Once we approach the chorus for the last time after the bridge, we now come to expect that full texture, but Wildhorn cleverly makes an adaptation and delays that satisfying chorus hit, which makes the resolution that much more satisfying. For a brief moment, that texture that has been building up throughout the bridge disappears, giving us no accompaniment whatsoever. Then, as soon as we notice it, the texture returns at full force.
Then he will unravel you. Get into his head and under his skin, the things that he said.
This technique is actually used a few times in the anime. Here's an example.
ノートは2冊以上存在している。まだ終わってない。
It's such a clever technique because each time it's used, we know we're about to hear a musical or narrative climax, but that delay gives us that element of surprise and excitement. The ending of this song is so powerful. Elle and Light are singing the familiar chorus, but this time it has an extra 3 bars added before the final cadence to build anticipation. Firstly, we have these gorgeous 7 chords leading in, and then whilst the accompaniment is playing an A7, Elle clashes with the instruments beautifully by singing a B flat. That B flat is not diatonic, so the crunch it causes is awesome.
I am winning my game while I'm saying.
As Elle and Light sing the final line, the accompaniment comes back in with power chords, playing just the root and dominant of each chord.
I'm playing his game.
As the name might suggest, power chords elicit a powerful feeling, but they're also great here because they don't indicate either major or minor, therefore there's a more ambiguous feel at the end. Comparatively, if Wildhorn had used the 3rd degrees of these chords and made it clearly a D minor ending, it wouldn't have that same effect. Let me show you the difference.
'cause I'm living on borrowed time.
Yeah, the religious imagery is not subtle in the slightest for this song. This is where Misa has been arrested on suspicion of being the second Kira. The song is her telling the interrogators that no matter what they say or do to her, she will not betray Kira and reveal his secrets. Much of the melody in this song is reminiscent of Light's first solo back in Act 1, Hurricane.
So tie me up and try to break me. You will never change my mind.
The hardest rains, the coldest winds are waiting for the hurricane.
It really shows that up until the bitter end, Misa admired Light and would do anything for him. You can also hear callbacks to Elle's verse solo too, The Game Begins. Between the verses you can hear that melody, perhaps indicating a time skip between each verse where Elle is interrogating Misa.
Borrowed time.
Borrowed time is such a clever phrase to use. Misa literally lives on borrowed time, as she was supposed to die when her stalker attacked her. But the Shinigami jealous saved her, giving his remaining time to Misa. She's borrowing his time. This song is so sad because, whilst on one hand Misa is singing optimistically about her devotion to Kira, there's a sense that she knows that they have lost and that she's resigning herself to death.
The years roll on with or without me. I'm already gone.
Musically, the song stays in B minor throughout. Most other songs in the show have key changes, but the fact that this song stays in the same key throughout symbolises Misa's unwavering devotion. Other elements in the song stay the same throughout too. The verses and choruses use the same respective chord progressions on each repetition, and the tempo stays constant. Towards the end of the song, the texture is stripped down, leaving us with just Misa singing, accompanied by a guitar.
So tie me up and try to break me. You will never change my heart.
We are very familiar at this stage in the musical that Light is symbolised by a guitar, so that's a bittersweet touch.
When love comes.
Ugh, why is Act 2 sad song after sad song? At this point, Rem has realised the only way to save her is to erase her memories of the Death Note and kill Elle. But by killing Elle, Rem would be extending Misa's life, an action that is forbidden for Shinigamis, and that would result in Rem's own death. Throughout the show, we see Rem's understanding of love change. In her first song, They're Only Human, she's intrigued by this thing humans have, which is love, but is also cynical about it. By her second song, Mortals and Fools, Rem is warning Misa of the dangers of love, whilst at the same time still not understanding it completely. But in this song, she finally realises what love is, because she's experiencing it herself. There's lots of lovely double meanings in these lyrics.
It can take your breath away, or so that's what the poets say.
Love can literally take someone's breath away, the way your heartbeat quickens and a breath gets caught in your throat. But in Rem's case, love could literally take her breath away, because to fall in love with a human results in death for a Shinigami. Although Rem knows she's about to die, there's no sense of fear in the words she delivers.
Can't believe the peace I'm feeling, almost like it can't be real. Even if I die, love will survive.
Very sadly, there is no score available online for this song, so you'll have to put up with my questionable transcription here, but here's a few interesting notes from the score. The verse uses the most common chord progression in Western pop music, 1, 5, 6, 4. So many famous love songs use this chord progression. To name a few, I'm Yours, I Need Your Love, Rewrite the Stars, We Found Love, You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman. I could go on. So it makes sense that Wildhorn shows a chord progression for this love song that is so conventional in pop music. At the start of this chorus, Rem sings of love taking you by surprise. Wildhorn beautifully decorates this by having Rem sing an appoggiatura at the start of the chorus. That unprepared dissonance takes us by surprise and is resolved upwards beautifully.
When love comes, it takes you by surprise.
That's not the only bit of dissonance in this chorus though. There's a lovely suspension in the next bar, where the G from that G major chord is held into the next chord of D, making it a sus4 chord. Rem draws such an interesting parallel to Light and Elle. In the musical, those two humans are so focused on their grand ideals of power and justice that they lose their humanity, and don't feel any love or even mention it. but then they're contrasted by this ancient god of death who learns to love and becomes more human than the two actual human main characters. Throughout the show, Rem sings of love as a human-only trait, but in the end, she's the only character in this show who has true love for another. The song ends with one final beautiful double meaning.
Don't fade it. Share a kiss and then surrender when love comes.
To surrender to love is a saying, yet in Rem's case, love is her surrendering literally everything.
Is this the way it ends now? How could I not see this coming?
We're coming towards the end of the musical, and I know what you're thinking. At this point in the narrative, we're only about 2/3 of the way through the anime. How is the musical ending already? Well, they had to adapt the ending to fit into a 2-act musical. Let me explain how the plot diverts. Following Light's directions, Rem writes down L's name in her death note, including directions to manipulate his actions prior to his death to make it look like L was Kira. It specified that L will meet Light in an abandoned warehouse where he will hold Light at gunpoint, shooting him to only cause superficial damage before turning the gun on himself. Light's plan is he can return to the task force and explain that L tried to kill him, as evidenced by the gunshot wound, before L confessed to being Kira and shot himself. Right, got it? Now we can get into the song.
I'm sitting down and pouring tea as if I do it every day. Go through the motions like the hands upon a clock. Though it feels right, a part of me knows that it's wrong, as if another's will had moved me.
Like in the anime, L knows he's about to die. In these first few lines, he indicates that he's aware that his actions are being controlled by some unknown power and he is working on autopilot. This is also expressed through the music itself. The melody L sings in the verse simply copies the fifth of whichever triad is accompanying him, almost like he doesn't have the brain capacity to create his own melody anymore, and he's on autopilot, just singing along to the chords. The verse uses a repetitious chord progression. There's a nice bit of word painting in the lyrics where L describes being in a constant loop, whilst the chord progression underneath him performs a constant loop.
I'm like a software program caught inside an endless loop, just bad code that keeps repeating.
The chords in this progression are 1, 5, 6, 7 sharp 5. That final chord is interesting. The 7th chord in B major consists of an A sharp, C sharp and E. However here, that E is raised a semitone up to an F. That F natural gives the chord a Lydian feel. In the Lydian mode, the 4th degree of the scale is raised by a semitone, and in B major, that would be the E raised to an F. The sharpened 4th in Lydian gives music a mystical or haunting quality, and is used notably in many supernatural and otherworldly works. My favourite example is the theme from E.T. This is not the only time there are hints of Lydian in this song. In the chorus, L's melody includes a raised 4th. Have a listen.
Is this the way it ends now?
As a comparison, let me show you how it would sound without the raised 4th. The accompaniment also has hints of Lydian in the chorus. The final chord of the progression is a C sharp major chord, which is not diatonic to B major. It's technically a secondary dominant, but that F natural in the C sharp major chord, in the context of B major, is still a raised 4th and gives that mystical Lydian feeling. After L's verse and chorus, Light has his own, followed by a bridge and final chorus sung between the pair. Light sings his own very clear Lydian phrase.
Don't you see that you will die today? Is this the way it ends?
I'm going to admit, this song kinda disappointed me. This is the climax of the whole musical, and I expected something more exciting and dramatic. When I started transcribing this score and noticed those little Easter eggs, like the Lydian touches and L copying the chords, I started to like the song a lot more. But those aren't things you would pick up simply watching the musical for the first time. And for a piece that's supposed to be so climactic, I think it's time to throw subtleties out the window. But considering we're an hour into this analysis and this is my first critique, I don't think it's a huge issue in the grand scheme of things.
The hardest rains, the coldest winds are waiting for the hurricane.
So this song wasn't actually recorded, or at least wasn't released in English, but I need to include it for narrative purposes. Light's plan has gone as he hoped. The power of the Death Note has caused L to kill himself. Light, believing he is won, begins to celebrate, but Ryuk laments that life will return to a boring routine without L to challenge Light, and writes Light's name in the Death Note, killing him too. Ryuk observes the two dead bodies and departs the human world, remarking that they entertained him for a brief period, but both their lives were ultimately meaningless. This is the final song in the musical, and is sung just by the ensemble, with no named characters, which is poignant as of itself. A requiem is also known as a Mass for the Dead, and is performed most regularly within the Catholic Church. This is yet another good callback to Death Note's religious imagery. This song isn't defined as a requiem for Kira, a requiem for L, or even a requiem for Kira's victims. It's simply a requiem whose lyrics could be equated to any human. Death doesn't discriminate between the sinners and the saints, and all humans who have died in this show are equalled in this final song. There are so many questions left unanswered, but it doesn't matter. The lyrics themselves say we don't know who was right or wrong, who was weak or strong, but regardless, there's nothing left to learn. The point is, no one wins. The theme throughout the show is that this is a game. Elle and Light are competing for who is going to come out victorious, constantly stating that only one of them will win in the end. Neither of them ever expected that there could be an outcome where everyone loses. In addition, the whole song is basically symbolising that nothing has changed. There's a line about breeze blowing through trees that juxtaposes with the hurricane metaphor Light describes himself as throughout the show. In Light's egocentric view, his impact was a hurricane ripping through the trees, but the ensemble refer to it as a simple breeze. Light and Elle lose their humanity in the course of this story. Only in death does it return. Looking at the music for this song, there is some beautiful writing. As the title may suggest, it's heavily inspired by Requiem mass music. One of my favourite parts is here. Up until now, the chorus has been singing in 4-part harmony, but they sing in octaves for a bar, and then lead into this gorgeous Phrygian cadence. The Phrygian cadence is characteristic of Baroque music and can give music an archaic sound, which works great here because the whole purpose of the song is to say that the world operates on a loop, and at our core, we are the same humans that lived centuries past. There's also this descending bass line in the next bar that is just so satisfying to the ear. The song ends in style with yet another deep lyric. There's two meanings here. Firstly, the word goodbye is very old, so it's suggesting this story is one that has long existed. But the word goodbye actually originated as a contraction of the phrase God be with you, ending the show on one final religious reference. And so ends this beast of a video. No, I had so much fun making this, and it just made me fall in love with this musical even more. I really hope one day some big boss on Broadway will revisit this musical and give it the chance it deserves. We are blessed to have this album, but I feel Broadway really missed out on something so special with this. But never say never. Keep raving about it on the internet, and who knows, maybe someday someone with power will take notice. But thank you so much for watching. This was a really long video, so I appreciate you taking the time to do so. If you'd like to see more videos, please subscribe and let me know in the comments what you want to see next. See you soon.